The radar signature appeared at 3:47 hours, 30 miles southeast of Nellis Air Force Base. It shouldn't have been there. The restricted airspace had been clear for 17 minutes when the blip materialized on Senior Airman Rodriguez's scope, moving at impossible angles that made his coffee cup pause halfway to his lips. Ghost lead, we have an unidentified aircraft in restricted sector 77. Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm system, his usual bravado replaced by something approaching awe. "Sir, this thing is dancing." Major Kane Harrison leaned forward in the control tower, his weathered hands gripping the radio. 23 years of military aviation had taught him that radar ghosts didn't perform barrel rolls. Classification: unknown. No transponder, no flight plan. But Major, Rodriguez hesitated, watching the green dot trace a perfect figure-eight pattern in the pre-dawn darkness. "It's flying the Valkyrie protocol." The words hit the tower like a physical blow. The Valkyrie protocol had been classified beyond black for 8 years, known only to a handful of test pilots who'd sworn blood oaths to carry its secrets to their graves. It was a flight pattern so dangerous, so precise, that only 3 pilots in Air Force history had ever successfully completed it. 2 were dead. The third. Harrison's jaw tightened as he keyed the radio. "Scramble Ghost Squadron, full combat load." Within minutes, 4 F-22 Raptors screamed into the Nevada sky, their twin Pratt and Whitney engines carving contrails against the stars. Ghost Lead's voice was ice-cold professional as he established visual contact. "Tower, we have eyes on. Single aircraft appears to be. Jesus Christ, what is that thing?" The aircraft defied classification. Sleek where it should be angular, silent where it should roar. It moved through the air like liquid mercury given wings. No nation on Earth possessed technology this advanced, yet here it danced in American airspace, performing maneuvers that belonged in classified files buried 6 feet under Pentagon concrete. "Ghost Squadron, you are cleared to engage if hostile intent is confirmed," Harrison commanded, his voice steady despite the ice forming in his veins. "Maintain visual. Attempt radio contact on all frequencies." But as the F-22s closed formation around the mysterious craft, something impossible happened. The unknown aircraft began mirroring their movements with perfect precision, not as evasion, but as a form of aerial communication. Each wingbeat spoke fluency in the unwritten language of military aviation. And in that moment, Lieutenant Colonel Miranda Whisper Voss recognized something that would change everything. The flight pattern wasn't just similar to the Valkyrie protocol. It was identical, down to the microsecond timing that had taken her 3 years to master. Someone was out there, flying her signature, broadcasting a message that only she could understand. The message was simple. Remember who you trained. Remember what you promised. Remember why you disappeared. Ghost Lead's finger hovered over the trigger, but Whisper's voice cut through the tactical channel with quiet authority. Hold fire. That's not an enemy. That's a ghost coming home. But the aircraft had vanished as suddenly as it appeared, leaving only questions that would unravel a conspiracy 8 years in the making. In the control tower, Harrison stared at empty skis and wondered if he just witnessed the return of the Air Force's most dangerous pilot, or its greatest threat. The hunt for answers would begin at sunrise. The hunt for Lieutenant Colonel Kestrel Phoenix Thorne had already begun. Phoenix had been dead for 8 years, her F-35 lost over the Pacific during a routine training mission that wasn't routine at all. The wreckage was never found. The black box never recovered. The official report cited pilot error, a conclusion that her squadron mates knew was impossible. Phoenix didn't make errors. She made legends. Now, as the sun painted the Nevada desert gold, Whisper stood in her quarters staring at a photograph she'd hidden for nearly a decade. Two women in flight suits, arms draped over each other's shoulders, genuine smiles breaking through their professional composure. The inscription read, "To Whisper, keep the sky safe until I get back. Phoenix." The Valkyrie Protocol had been Phoenix's creation, a flight pattern so complex it required not just exceptional skill, but an intuitive understanding of aerodynamics that bordered on supernatural. They developed it together during those long nights at Edwards Air Force Base, two pilots pushing the boundaries of what human reflexes could achieve at Mach 2. Whisper traced her finger along Phoenix's face in the photograph, remembering the way her friend's eyes lit up when discussing theoretical physics and impossible maneuvers. Phoenix had always been different, brilliant to the point of intimidation, fearless to the point of recklessness, and loyal to the point of self-destruction. The official story claimed Phoenix had suffered spatial disorientation during a classified test flight. She'd supposedly lost control of her aircraft and augured into the Pacific at terminal velocity. But Whisper knew better. Phoenix had been working on something before her disappearance, something that had her meeting with Pentagon officials and speaking in whispers about national security implications that could reshape military aviation forever. The knock on her door came precisely at 800 hours. Colonel Harrison stood in the hallway, his expression grim but respectful. Behind him, two Air Force intelligence officers in crisp uniforms that screamed alphabet soup agencies. "Colonel Voss," Harrison said formally, using her rank despite their informal relationship. "We need to discuss last night's incident." Whisper straightened, muscle memory clicking into place. 8 years of flying transport missions and training rookies had softened her edges, but underneath the diplomatic facade, The instincts of an elite pilot remained razor-sharp. She'd seen this dance before: the careful approach, the respectful distance, the underlying threat masked as professional courtesy. "Sir," she replied, stepping aside to allow them entry into her Spartan quarters. The lead intelligence officer, a sharp-eyed woman with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to having her questions answered, introduced herself as Director Walsh. Her partner remained silent, taking notes in a leather portfolio that probably cost more than Whisper's monthly salary. "Colonel, your service record indicates familiarity with classified flight protocols," Walsh began, her tone conversational but loaded with implication. "Specifically, certain advanced maneuvers that remain beyond current operational parameters." Whisper's poker face could have won championships. "I've been qualified on several experimental platforms, ma'am. Most details remain classified above my clearance level." "The Valkyrie Protocol," Walsh said, watching Whisper's reaction like a hawk studying prey. The name hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken accusations and buried secrets. Whisper felt the familiar weight of classified knowledge pressing against her chest, the burden of promises made to the dead and the living alike. "I'm not familiar with that designation," she lied smoothly, knowing they knew she was lying, knowing they expected nothing less. Walsh smiled, a predator's expression that didn't reach her eyes. "Colonel, we have radar telemetry showing an unidentified aircraft performing maneuvers that match classified flight patterns. These maneuvers were witnessed by multiple Air Force personnel and recorded by our most sophisticated tracking systems." She paused, leaning forward slightly. "Our analysis indicates only 2 pilots in Air Force history have ever successfully executed this particular sequence. One is standing in this room. The other has been officially dead for 8 years." Whisper's hands remained steady at her sides, but inside, her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird. Phoenix was alive. The impossible maneuver hadn't been a message, it had been proof of life, transmitted in the only language their friendship had ever truly shared. "Ma'am," Whisper said carefully, "I can only speak to my own flight activities, which are fully documented and accounted for. If there's been some kind of security breach, I'm prepared to assist the investigation in any capacity deemed appropriate." The silence stretched until the unnamed officer looked up from his notes. "Colonel Voss," he said, speaking for the first time, "we're not here to investigate you. We're here to ask for your help finding someone we thought was dead. Someone who appears to be very much alive and flying aircraft that officially don't exist." The world shifted beneath Whisper's feet. They weren't here to arrest her or strip her clearance. They were here because they needed her expertise to track down a ghost who had just announced her presence in the most dramatic way possible. Phoenix wasn't just alive. She was flying something revolutionary, something that made the F-22 look like a crop duster by comparison. "What do you need me to do?" Whisper asked, though she already knew the answer would change everything. Director Walsh smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "Pack your gear, Colonel. We're going hunting." The briefing room at Nellie's AFB hummed with the kind of tension that preceded either triumph or catastrophe. Whisper sat at a polished conference table, surrounded by faces she recognized from classified project folders and Pentagon corridors she'd only visited in nightmares. General Patricia Hawk commanded the room with the quiet authority of someone who'd spent 4 decades turning theoretical aircraft into operational reality. Her silver hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, but her eyes held the spark of a pilot who still dreamed in jet fuel and contrails. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hawk began, her voice carrying the weight of classified tonnage. "What occurred over Nevada airspace last night represents either our greatest security breach in 2 decades or the return of one of our most valuable assets. Possibly both." The main screen flickered to life, displaying radar tracks that resembled abstract art more than flight paths. The mysterious aircraft had executed turns that should have generated G-forces sufficient to liquefy human tissue. Yet the telemetry suggested smooth, controlled flight throughout the entire sequence. Director Walsh, "Brief them on current intelligence assessment," Hawk commanded. Walsh stood, clicking to the next slide. At 3:47 hours, long-range sensors detected an aircraft of unknown configuration entering restricted airspace. The craft demonstrated capabilities beyond current technology paradigms, including apparent mastery of physics-defying flight characteristics. Whisper studied the data, her pilot's instincts automatically calculating angles and velocities. Every movement was deliberate, purposeful, forming a pattern that spoke to her in a language deeper than words. Phoenix was showing off, but more than that, she was sending a message encoded in mathematics and motion. "Colonel Voss," Hawk's voice cut through her analysis, "your assessment." All eyes turned toward her. Whisper felt the weight of expectation, the delicate balance between honesty and operational security. These people needed her expertise, but they also needed her to confirm what they already suspected. "The flight pattern demonstrates intimate knowledge of advanced aerodynamics," she said carefully. "Whoever was flying that aircraft has been trained at the highest levels of military aviation. The precision required suggests years of experience with experimental platforms. Platforms like the Aurora project," asked a civilian contractor, whose name tag identified him as Dr. Marcus Webb from Lockheed's Skunk Works division. The Aurora Project. Whisper's breath caught despite her training. Aurora had been theoretical when she and Phoenix worked together, a hypersonic reconnaissance platform that existed only in computer simulations and fevered dreams of aerospace engineers. If Phoenix had been involved in bringing Aurora to operational status. Dr. Webb. General Hawk's tone carried a warning. Operational details remain compartmentalized. But the damage was done. Whisper now understood the stakes. Phoenix wasn't just alive. She was flying the most advanced aircraft ever conceived, an airplane that could revolutionize air warfare or destroy the balance of global power depending on whose hands controlled it. Colonel Voss, Director Walsh continued, "We need someone who understands how Lieutenant Colonel Thorne thinks, how she flies, where she might go to ground. Your partnership during the experimental flight program makes you our best asset for predicting her next move." Partnership. The word carried implications that made Whisper's chest tighten. She and Phoenix had been more than partners. They'd been kindred spirits, two women carving their names into a profession that still viewed them as curiosities rather than warriors. Their friendship had been forged in the crucible of shared ambition and mutual respect, tempered by countless hours of pushing each other to excel beyond the boundaries of possible. "If Phoenix is alive," Whisper said slowly, "and if she's flying something like Aurora, then she's not running from us. She's leading us somewhere. The question is whether we're smart enough to follow." General Hawk leaned forward. "Explain." "Ma'am, Phoenix doesn't showboat without purpose. Last night's display was meant to be seen, meant to be recorded. She wanted us to know she's out there." Whisper paused, choosing her words carefully. "The Valkyrie protocol isn't just difficult to execute, it's impossible to fake. Only someone with perfect understanding of the original parameters could reproduce it so precisely." "You're suggesting this was a coded communication?" Dr. Webb asked. "I'm suggesting Phoenix is trying to tell us something. And given the aircraft she's apparently flying, we need to listen very carefully to what that something might be." The room fell silent as the implications settled. If Phoenix had spent 8 years developing capabilities this advanced in secret, the question wasn't just where she'd been. It was who she'd been working with, and what she knew that made her disappearance necessary in the first place. General Hawk's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Colonel Voss, you're being reassigned effective immediately. Your new mission: find Lieutenant Colonel Thorne and determine whether she represents an asset or a threat." Whisper nodded, though inside, her heart was already racing toward conclusions her mind wasn't ready to accept. Phoenix was alive, flying impossible aircraft, and apparently waiting for someone smart enough to decode her message. The hunt would begin immediately. But as she left the briefing room, one question haunted her thoughts. What had Phoenix discovered 8 years ago that was worth faking her own death to investigate? The answer to that question would determine whether they were about to prevent a catastrophe or cause one. The flight line at Nellie's buzzed with activity as ground crews prepared Ghost Squadron for an extended operation. Whisper walked among the F-22 Raptors, their angular stealth profiles gleaming under harsh fluorescent lights, feeling like a gladiator selecting weapons for an arena where the rules had been rewritten overnight. Major Danny Razor Mitchell approached from across the tarmac, his easy grin masking the predatory instincts of someone who'd logged over 3,000 hours in air-to-air combat. He'd been Phoenix's wingman during their final training exercise together, the last person to see her alive according to official records. "Whisper," he called out, using her call sign with the casual familiarity of shared danger. "Heard you're leading this circus. About time they put someone competent in charge of finding our ghost." The nickname made her pause. Ghost. It was too appropriate, too loaded with meaning to be accidental. Phoenix had always been elusive, difficult to pin down even when she was standing right next to you. Now she'd become literal mythology, a legend that flew impossible aircraft and vanished into classified darkness. "Razor," she replied, studying his expression for tells. "What do you remember about her last flight?" His smile faltered, replaced by something harder to define. Official debrief covered everything relevant to the investigation. "This isn't official. This is me asking you, pilot to pilot, what really happened out there." Mitchell glanced around the hangar, confirming they were relatively alone among the organized chaos of pre-flight preparations. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of 8 years of suppressed doubt. "Phoenix was different that last week, distracted. She kept checking her watch during briefings like she was waiting for something, and her flying." He paused, searching for words. "You know how she was normally, precise, calculated, but aggressive when the situation called for it." Whisper nodded. Phoenix had possessed an almost supernatural ability to read aerial situations, to anticipate enemy movements 3 steps ahead, while executing maneuvers that pushed both aircraft and pilot to their absolute limits. "That day was different," Mitchell continued. "She flew like someone following a script. Every turn, every altitude change was predetermined. I kept waiting for her to break pattern, to show me something unexpected, but she just didn't." The implication hung between them like unexploded ordnance. Phoenix's flying had become mechanical in those final moments, as if she was executing a predetermined sequence rather than responding to tactical situations, as if she was following instructions from someone else. "Did she say anything over comms? Anything unusual?" Just before she went dark, she transmitted something that didn't make sense. She said, "Whisper 6, package delivered, initiating Protocol 7." Then nothing. Whisper 6, her old call sign from their experimental flight program. Phoenix had been communicating directly with her, 8 years in the future, trusting that eventually the message would reach its intended recipient. Protocol 7 had been their code for emergency extraction procedures, disappearing without a trace when operational security demanded it. Phoenix hadn't died in that training accident. She'd executed the most sophisticated vanishing act in military aviation history, and she'd been planning it long enough to plant coded messages for her closest friend to eventually decode. "Razor," Whisper said quietly, "I need you to forget this conversation ever happened. But I also need you to think very carefully about what else you might remember that doesn't match the official story." He studied her face, reading the subtext beneath her words. "This isn't just about finding a missing pilot, is it?" "No," she replied, watching ground crews fuel the Raptors for whatever came next. "I think we're about to uncover something that people have been willing to kill to keep secret, and Phoenix has been gathering evidence for 8 years." The morning briefing revealed the scope of their operation. Ghost Squadron would deploy in sections across a 1,000-square-mile search grid, following intelligence projections about where Phoenix might surface next. The Aurora aircraft, assuming that's what she was flying, possessed range and speed capabilities that made traditional pursuit almost meaningless. Captain Elena "Viper" Santos, the squadron's newest member, raised her hand during the tactical overview. "Ma'am, if this aircraft has the performance characteristics suggested by preliminary analysis, what's our engagement protocol if we achieve intercept?" General Hawk exchanged glances with Director Walsh before responding. "Your mission is observation and communication attempt only. Under no circumstances are you authorized to engage unless fired upon first. This aircraft may represent friendly assets operating under deep cover classification." Friendly assets. The euphemism carried implications that made Whisper's stomach tighten. If Phoenix was friendly, why the 8-year silence? If she was working for American interests, why reveal herself in such a dramatic fashion now? Dr. Webb stepped forward with a tablet displaying technical specifications that made every pilot in the room whistle softly. "Theoretical performance envelope suggests sustained hypersonic flight, near unlimited operational ceiling, and electromagnetic signature masking that renders conventional radar detection sporadic at best." In English, Doc, Razor requested. "This aircraft can outrun, outclimb, and effectively disappear from anything currently in our inventory. Your F-22s are excellent interceptors, but against Aurora-class capabilities, You're bringing knives to a gunfight." The admission settled over the briefing room like morning fog. They were hunting something that could make them irrelevant with minimal effort. Success would depend entirely on whether Phoenix wanted to be found, not on their tactical superiority or operational expertise. Whisper stood up, feeling the weight of command settling across her shoulders. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're not going up there to capture a rogue pilot. We're going up there to make contact with someone who's been waiting 8 years for us to get smart enough to understand what she's been trying to tell us." She paused, meeting each pilot's eyes in turn. Phoenix was one of us. Whatever she's been doing, wherever she's been, she chose to come back. That means something. Our job is to figure out what that something is before anyone else decides to shoot first and ask questions later. The mission would launch at sunset, when atmospheric conditions and orbital intelligence assets provided optimal coverage for their search pattern. 6 hours to find answers that had been hidden for 8 years. Whisper spent those hours studying classified files and reading between lines that had been carefully edited to obscure rather than illuminate. Phoenix's personnel record contained gaps that suggested assignment to programs, so classified they didn't officially exist. Her commendations referenced operations in locations that weren't supposed to have American aircraft presence. The picture that emerged was of a pilot selected for something far beyond conventional military aviation, someone trusted with secrets that could reshape global power balances. The question that remained was whether those secrets had made her a guardian or a fugitive. As the sun touched the horizon, painting the Nevada sky in shades of amber and gold, Whisper climbed into her F-22 and began the pre-flight checklist that had become second nature over thousands of hours. But tonight felt different. Tonight she was hunting a ghost who knew her better than anyone alive. Tonight she might finally get answers to questions that had haunted her dreams for 8 years. The hunt for Phoenix began with the roar of afterburners lighting up the desert twilight. 4 F-22 Raptors lifted off in formation, their stealth profiles disappearing against the star-filled sky like predators designed by angels and engineers working in perfect collaboration. "Ghost lead to all aircraft," Whisper's voice crackled through the tactical frequency, professional and steady despite the emotional storm brewing beneath her calm exterior. "Maintain search formation, sensors active, weapons safe. We're looking for friendly contact, not target acquisition." The irony wasn't lost on her. She was leading a squadron of America's most advanced interceptors on a hunt for an aircraft that could probably outmaneuver them without breaking a sweat. If Phoenix wanted to avoid detection, no amount of radar sophistication or tactical expertise would matter. But if Phoenix wanted to be found, Ghost 2, contact bearing 090, Altitude Angels 40. Razor's voice carried the professional excitement of a hunter spotting prey. Single aircraft. Electronic signature consistent with yesterday's unknown. Whisper felt her heart skip as she adjusted course toward the contact. After 8 years of wondering, 8 years of questions that had no answers, Phoenix was finally within range of conversation rather than speculation. All aircraft converge on Ghost 2's bearing. Maintain defensive formation but do not appear threatening. This is first contact with potentially friendly assets. The radar contact materialized on her display like a green star being born in electronic darkness. Its movement patterns were distinctive, purposeful, the aerial equivalent of someone waving to get attention rather than trying to hide. Ghost lead, I have visual, Captain Santos reported, her voice tight with concentration. Jesus Christ, what is that thing? Through her cockpit canopy, Whisper saw it for the first time, a shape that defied conventional aircraft design, flowing rather than angular, more organic than mechanical. It moved through the air like liquid mercury given consciousness, every maneuver executed with the kind of precision that suggested either artificial intelligence or human skill refined beyond normal limitations. Ghost Squadron, this is Angel. Phoenix's voice cut through the tactical frequency like a blade through silk. 8 years older but unmistakably familiar. The call sign she'd never used in official records. The name Whisper had given her during their first training flight together, when Phoenix had pulled off a maneuver so perfect it seemed divinely inspired. Angel, this is Ghost lead, Whisper replied, fighting to keep emotion out of her voice. It's good to hear your voice. We need to talk. Roger that, Ghost lead. Follow my heading. We have approximately 12 minutes before orbital surveillance assets reacquire this airspace. There's somewhere I need to show you. The Aurora aircraft, for that's clearly what it was, began a gentle descent toward coordinates that made Whisper's navigation computer chime with warnings. They were heading toward airspace that officially didn't exist, a blank spot on maps where test flights went to die, and classified projects disappeared into bureaucratic black holes. Angel, what are we flying into? Razor asked, his tactical instincts overriding 8 years of curiosity about their missing squadron mate. The truth, Razor. Finally, the whole truth about what we've been fighting for and who we've been fighting against. Phoenix's aircraft led them through a canyon system that shouldn't have been navigable at their current speed. Walls of red sandstone flashing past their wingtips with inches to spare. The Aurora moved like it was following a predetermined path, every turn calculated to maintain perfect formation, while leading them deeper into terrain that would challenge the most experienced pilots. Angel, Whisper called, where the hell have you been for 8 years? Building something, Whisper. building the future, and trying to figure out who was trying to kill us and why. The words hit like physical blows. Someone had tried to kill them. Phoenix hadn't disappeared because of operational requirements or classified assignments. She'd run because staying would have meant dying, and she'd spent 8 years in the shadows gathering evidence about threats that official channels couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge. Define us. Director Walsh's voice cut through their private reunion, reminding them that their conversation was being monitored by intelligence assets who viewed emotional connections as operational security risks. Director Walsh, Phoenix replied, somehow identifying the speaker despite encrypted communications. I define us as anyone who believes American air superiority should serve American interests rather than the highest bidder. The implication crashed over them like a cold wave. Corporate espionage, foreign influence, technology transfer to hostile nations. Phoenix hadn't just been flying experimental aircraft. She'd been investigating corruption at levels that could compromise national security for generations. Angel, transmit coordinates for secure meeting. General Hawk's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected global stability. We need detailed debriefing on all intelligence gathered during your period of operational absence. General, with respect, I haven't been absent. I've been working. And what I've discovered makes yesterday's airspace demonstration look like a gentle warning compared to what's coming. Phoenix's aircraft suddenly accelerated, pulling away from their formation with speed that made their F-22s look stationary by comparison. But instead of disappearing, she executed a perfect Immelman turn and came back toward them, flying inverted at their altitude with precise formation discipline. "Follow me home," she said. "It's time you met my new squadron." The revelation that Phoenix had a squadron, that she'd been operating with other pilots for 8 years while officially dead, reframed everything they thought they knew about her disappearance. This wasn't a solo operation. This was an organized resistance movement operating from within the military-industrial complex itself. As they followed her toward coordinates that didn't appear on any official charts, Whisper realized their hunt had just become something far more complex and dangerous. They weren't just finding a missing pilot. They were about to be inducted into a shadow war that had been raging beneath the surface of official military operations for nearly a decade. The question was whether they were prepared for what Phoenix had learned in those 8 years of gathering evidence and building capabilities that officially didn't exist. The landing zone materialized from desert camouflage like a magic trick executed by aerospace engineers. What had appeared to be empty wasteland suddenly revealed hidden runways, camouflaged hangars, and infrastructure that suggested permanent operations rather than temporary deployment. Ghost Squadron, you are cleared for landing on runway 07. Phoenix's voice carried the casual authority of someone directing traffic in her own backyard. Ground crews will marshal you to appropriate parking positions. Whisper felt her F-22 touch down on pavement that shouldn't have existed, in a facility that had no official designation or congressional funding authorization. As she taxied past buildings that emerged from desert camouflage with mechanical precision, the scope of Phoenix's 8-year project became staggeringly apparent. This wasn't just a hideout. This was a fully operational air base, complete with maintenance facilities, fuel storage, communications equipment, and what appeared to be residential quarters for permanent personnel. Someone had invested hundreds of millions of dollars in creating a shadow installation that could support extended operations by multiple aircraft and crews. "Welcome to Sanctuary," Phoenix said over ground frequency as Whisper completed her shutdown checklist. Population classified, mission classified, existence classified. But the coffee is excellent and we've got a lot to discuss. Through her canopy, Whisper watched Phoenix's aircraft taxi into a hangar that dwarfed anything she'd ever seen. The Aurora was even more impressive on the ground, sleek, predatory, covered in materials that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But what caught her attention were the other aircraft visible in the shadows of the massive structure. More Auroras, at least 6 of them, possibly more hidden in the depths of the facility. Phoenix hadn't just stolen a prototype. She'd apparently been involved in manufacturing an entire squadron of aircraft that officially didn't exist. Ground crews approached Ghost Squadron with the professional efficiency of personnel accustomed to handling classified aircraft. Their uniforms bore no insignia, no identification, nothing that would indicate which branch of service or government agency employed them. They moved with military precision, but answered to authority structures that remained invisible. "Ghost Lead, welcome to Sanctuary," a voice said through her ground communications. "Colonel Thorne requests your presence in the briefing facility as soon as you've completed standard arrival procedures." Colonel Thorne. Phoenix had been promoted during her 8 years of official death, advancing through rank structures that apparently operated parallel to conventional military hierarchies. Someone with serious authority had been backing her operation, providing resources and institutional support for activities that bordered on treasonous, if viewed through certain bureaucratic lenses. Whisper completed her post-flight inspection with automatic precision, while her mind processed implications that grew more complex with each passing minute. The facility around her represented capabilities that could shift global power balances overnight. In the wrong hands, Aurora Squadron could destabilize international relations for decades. In the right hands, It could prevent conflicts that conventional diplomacy couldn't address. The question was determining which hands were currently controlling it. "Ma'am," Senior Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached as she climbed down from her aircraft. He looked older than she remembered, weathered by 8 years of operations that had apparently taken him far from conventional Air Force assignments. "Colonel Thorne asked me to escort you and your squadron to the briefing facility." Rodriguez had been Phoenix's crew chief during their experimental flight program, a master mechanic who could diagnose engine problems by listening to subtle changes in turbine pitch. If he was here, then Phoenix's operation had been recruiting specific personnel for specific capabilities rather than operating with whoever happened to be available. "Rodriguez," she said, removing her helmet and studying his face for clues. "Good to see you're alive. We were told your transport went down over Afghanistan 6 years ago." "Ma'am, a lot of people were told a lot of things that weren't exactly accurate. Colonel Thorne will explain everything, but the short version is that certain elements within the military-industrial complex decided that some of us were more valuable dead than alive, at least officially." The briefing facility looked like something from a science fiction movie, crossed with a Pentagon Situation Room. Multiple screens displayed global intelligence feeds, satellite imagery, and tactical assessments that suggested real-time monitoring of military activities across multiple continents. The technology was at least a generation ahead of anything Whisper had seen in conventional installations. Phoenix stood at the center of it all, still wearing her flight suit, but somehow looking more like a general commanding strategic operations than a pilot returning from a routine mission. 8 years had changed her, added confidence to natural ability, tempered recklessness with wisdom, earned through experiences that remained classified beyond official channels. "Whisper," she said, using the call sign with affection that bridged 8 years of separation and uncertainty. "Thank you for understanding the message. I wasn't sure anyone would remember the protocols well enough to decode what I was trying to communicate." "The Valkyrie pattern was pretty unmistakable," Whisper replied, studying her friend's face for clues about what those 8 years had cost. "But Phoenix, what the hell is all this? Where have you been? Who's been funding this operation?" Phoenix smiled, the expression carrying shadows that hadn't been there 8 years ago. "Those are the right questions. Unfortunately, the answers are going to change how you think about everything we were trained to protect." She gestured toward chairs arranged around a conference table that could have hosted meetings determining the fate of nations. "Have a seat, all of you, because what I'm about to show you will either make you the most important pilots in American military history, or it will get us all killed for knowing too much." Director Walsh's voice crackled through encrypted communications, reminding them that their conversation was being monitored by intelligence assets whose loyalties remained deliberately obscure. Colonel Thorne, this facility represents a significant deviation from approved operational parameters. We need immediate clarification of command authority and mission objectives. Phoenix looked directly into a camera that Whisper hadn't noticed before responding. Director Walsh, command authority is compartmentalized above your clearance level. Mission objectives are prevention of technology transfer to hostile foreign interests and elimination of domestic threats to national security infrastructure. The formal language carried implications that made everyone in the room shift uncomfortably. Phoenix wasn't just operating outside normal channels. She was operating under authority that superseded normal channels, taking orders from levels of government that most military personnel never knew existed. In simpler terms, Phoenix continued, now addressing her assembled guests, we've been fighting a shadow war against people who decided that selling American air superiority to the highest bidder was more profitable than protecting American airspace. The briefing that followed would reshape everything they thought they knew about military aviation, national security, and the thin line between patriotism and treason. The main screen flickered to life, displaying satellite imagery of military installations across 3 continents. Phoenix used a laser pointer to highlight specific facilities, each marked with symbols that indicated intelligence assessment and threat level classification. For 8 years, we've been tracking systematic theft of classified aviation technology, Phoenix began, her voice carrying the weight of accumulated evidence and suppressed outrage. Not random espionage or opportunistic hacking, organized, institutional betrayal by individuals with access to the highest levels of military research and development. She clicked to the next slide, showing financial records that made several people in the room whistle softly. Defense contractors selling technical specifications to foreign buyers. Pentagon officials accepting consulting contracts with hostile intelligence services. Test pilots whose aircraft accidents happened to occur precisely when they discovered evidence of technology transfer. Whisper felt cold understanding settle in her chest. The training accident that killed you wasn't an accident and wasn't meant to kill me. Phoenix's expression hardened with memories that had been suppressed for operational security. I was investigating unusual engine modifications in several test aircraft when my flight plan was deliberately altered to route me over a surface-to-air missile installation that wasn't supposed to exist in international waters. The implications crashed over them like a physical wave. Phoenix had been assassinated, or at least, there had been an attempt by people with access to classified flight plans and advanced weapons systems. Her survival and subsequent disappearance had been improvised escape and evasion tactics executed under circumstances that would have killed most pilots. "Who ordered the hit?" Razor asked, his usual easy humor replaced by something much harder. "That's what we've spent 8 years trying to determine. The investigation led us through shell companies, offshore banking, congressional offices, and Pentagon procurement divisions. The conspiracy involves people we're trained to trust with our